Hi class. This is going to be the lecture on ethnography, and what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to cover the basics of what ethnography is, why it's useful, and then probably in a second video I'll do something about how you can actually do it well. So ethnography is one specific type of practice that falls within the broader realm of user experience. And this is a slide done by Steve Mulder. And really it breaks down the whole realm of user research into qualitative and quantitative. So qualitative is going to be more conversational, it's going to be more subjective. Quantitative is much more like a survey of, it's often how people think of traditional data. So it's like, we did a survey of 10,000 people and 90% said this and 50% that said this. Qualitative is much more related to anthropology and ethnography, where you're getting insights about based on what people say through conversation and more in-depth means. Another way to kind of slice this user research realm is to think about this idea of behaviors and goals and attitudes. So behaviors are, observed, understood, what people are actually doing, whereas, aspirations and what they might say they're doing, oftentimes there's quite a big difference. And so focus groups are great for getting, for understanding what people might say about what they're going to do, but oftentimes they're doing something quite different. So as much as possible, what you want to be doing is understanding how people actually behave. So the richer data experience would be that, let's say you're interviewing, folks around, trying to develop a new type of construction piece of equipment. The best thing to do would be to go to a construction site and both talk to people using existing equipment, but also see how they're using that existing equipment, because there may be things that, are just automatic to them that they don't think to mention to you, and there may be things that are just unconscious. So it could be that they have one kind of way that they're thinking about it, but what they do in practice is actually different. Another great example of that is eye tracking. If you're doing UI, UX user research, a lot of times that's something where, you'll be trying to optimize where a button should go and seeing what ads people pay attention to, things like that. Those are all much more on the behavior side of user research. What we're going to be doing is primarily user interviews, and some of that is because we're not going to be able to go out and we're not going to be able to get into people's living rooms. In past classes, we've had people ride the train. We're not going to be able to do that. So we'll be doing user interviews, but that doesn't mean there isn't a lot of rich data that can be picked up. So and I would encourage you all to do video interviews, because people's body language, the way they express things, is incredibly telling, and you can learn a lot from both their, what they're telling you, but also how they're telling you it. And that's the idea of, being an ethnographer here, where you're really looking to elicit rich data and get a deep understanding of the meaning that these different elements play in the user's lives. Okay, so that's an overview on the user research space, and I share that with you just because I imagine many of you are going to go into fields where you might be doing some other flavors of user research, not just what we're doing here in this class. So why do we interview? This is the bedrock of design thinking. Interviewing is the raw material, right? This portion of the process is what's going to fuel all the other initiatives you do within a human-centered design process. So a couple really clear things it does. One, it can reveal a new frame on the challenge, right? For folks who are gathering data, and there's plenty of examples of like Procter & Gamble, which massive company, has masses of quantitative data. But what happens is that data is only good as the questions that it's asking, right? So if you're asking a survey about a very particular thing, what that survey will do is tell you a lot about that thing. What the survey won't tell you is what you might be missing. And so taking an open-ended ethnographic approach, you can understand, hey, maybe this challenge is really about this. And that's what's revealing a new frame on the challenge. The second thing is that you're going to find out like what's meaningful to users, right? Rather than going with your preconceived notions of like, hey, I really think that, it's better to have a better grip on this, hedge trimmer. Understand what matters to users. What are they struggling with? And that can help give you insight that's going to make a much more effective product because you're meeting them where they are rather than trying to tell them, convert them to your way of thinking. The other thing related to that is just creating products and services that matter, right? This is one of the areas where I feel like it's incredibly sustainable to actually not build things that don't need to be built, right? If you think of the waste that goes into all of the elements of a life cycle of crappy products, it's astounding, right? So let's just make less stuff and be better about understanding what actually needs to get made. And then the final thing, and this comes more within organizations, but is it shifts the conversation from kind of ego-driven design to user-centered design. And oftentimes what happens within larger organizations, there's, different power structures and, maybe it's marketing, maybe it's product design or engineering. There's usually some part of the organization that's more influential. What can often happen is that those folks or folks in there who are, charismatic or just, really like domineering get to often have a disproportionate say about what gets made. So what you can do is by shifting the conversation from me and what I think should be versus you, and that's very oppositional, you can start to say, hey, here's what we heard from users. Here's what we think they need. And it kind of helps to neutralize some of that internal tension that's possible, and it helps just to kind of create a more neutral surface in which to create a design and help get things through based on decisions, based on data, the data that you've gathered from users.